Good evening and welcome to Be Informed. My name is Carl Hariwala and I've founded Be Informed to help people make good decisions. Today we'll be looking at the topic of leadership and we're joined by Jake Harris of Upper Limit Business and Mindset Coaching. We'll be speaking to us today about how to be an inspiring leader. Before I proceed, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Today's session is being recorded in Australia, and as the information shared today is general only, if you do have any specific questions about the subject matter of this session, please do reach out to a professional like Jake, who can assist you with your queries. In relation to housekeeping, if you do have any questions, please send them through the chat function and I will relay them to Jake for him to answer during the Q&A part of today's session. And following today's session, there'll be a one-page handout, which will be shared by email through to those that are registered by Eventbrite. The format of the session will conduct the seminar for about 25 minutes, and then we'll jump straight into the Q&A after that. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Jake, who will take us through today's seminar.
Brilliant, thanks, Carl. Talking how to be an inspiring leader. So today, huge topic, one I'm super keen to run through. This has been something I've been interested for a long time. So I want to share some things I've learned along the way in my personal journey, some things that have worked well for me, and break it down into a couple of key areas. So this is sort of part one of a two-parter. The first is about how to be an inspiring leader, and it's largely based around you and how you show up as a leader and take people on the journey with you. The second part of this one, later in the month, I'll be running more on how to engage and align a team. So largely I am talking about you, your own personal clarity, how you show up as a leader, how you show up as an inspiring and impactful leader. So I'm talking about being the kind of person that others look to for leadership, the kind of person that people turn to in uncertain situations when things get really hard, the kind of person who brings out the best in themselves and in others and those around them. That person that when things get hard, when no one knows what's going on, when people sort of turn their heads, that leader who doesn't know what's going on themselves, but gets up in front and stands up and gets everyone functional and back on track anyway. So the kind of person who leads teams to great results, who inspires them. Now, first up, acknowledging that if you're here, you've probably got a business, you lead a team, there's probably some element of your day-to-day that is doing a job as opposed to leading. And I'm talking about these as aspirational benchmarks here. The point being, though, if you can do a couple of these things well and stick to the key frameworks, it's amazing the impact you'll get. So with no further ado, let's jump into it. So first point, just next slide, if you could there, Carl, is first of all, being the kind of person, and what I mean by that is being the kind of person that creates the kind of results you want. That change starts with you. So again, this session's about how you show up as the kind of person and the results that you can create. The word inspiring, I think, is a really interesting way to start. So inspire means to breathe into in Latin. So the way I'd think about that is, what will you breathe life into? There are little sparks everywhere and there are sparks in people. How can you breathe into them as a leader and really fan those flames and stoke them and make them something? That's what lights a fire in someone and really gets them in behind you. The first big part on this journey, though, is about you and clarity and working out yourself why you want to be an inspiring leader. Another way of saying that is, what kind of outcomes are you looking to create? What kind of world do you want to build? You've got to get crystal clear on that yourself to really take people with you. The reason that that's important is it tells you how you think the world should be, and it tells you why you think that's important. And I would break that into, that's your vision and that's your meaning behind these things, which are terms I'll come back to a lot throughout this. So getting really clear on it yourself. The reason being, if you're not clear on where you're going and why you're doing it, it's really hard for your team to be really clear on that as well, the people following. So get clear on that is step one, definitely. Now, really, to be a leader, you need a tribe of people to be following, a movement behind you, right? So you're clear on where you want to go, what you want to do, what you want to create. how do you get people to come with you? I think the first way is really just taking the first step on that journey yourself and saying, come with me. So you do that by first leading yourself. And that's what I mean there by aspiring to those benchmarks, standards for what you're trying to create yourself. I've got a little example there. If you want your team to be more open to feedback, you better be good at taking it yourself. Another way to think about this is by saying, be the change you want to see. And this is another way of saying, really walk the walk day to day. Everyone's heard that one. You know, it's one thing to talk the talk, it's another to walk the walk. You need to be the person that is completely aligned with that at a personal level to create those kind of results. So thinking about that a lot. The next point on that is every journey needs a start point, right? So in order to lead a group, you've got to start from somewhere. You've got to meet them where they are. And another way of saying that is acknowledge the situation for what it is, the world the way it is at the moment. That's one, that's your A. B, going from A to B, the B there is where you want to go, how you think the world should be. A really simple way to think of this is if you use Google Maps, you say, I'm going to the library in town. No worries, that's my destination, that's my B. The first thing I'll ask you is, where are you at the moment? If you're not calibrated with this, it's really hard to get people behind you because you're talking about a reality that doesn't exist for them. So this could be business, this could be life, this could be anything. Meeting people where they are is the only way you can start leading them. That's the first step, right? Now, as I said before about talking the talk, walking the walk, these kind of things, yes, the messages you repeat over and over is super important, and I've got a whole section on that I'll come to in a minute. But the choices, your choices you make are what really tell people what you think deep down. So if you want to be in this position of being an inspiring leader out in front, everyone is going to look to you whether you want them to or not. That's a reality of the matter, right? So the examples, the standards you set, your actions, your inactions, all these things tell people what you think is okay and what you think is right. So that's what I mean when I say be the change you want to see. And again, I've used the word aspire to that benchmark. Realistically, you're not going to be perfect on that all the time. The key thing is here, staying in the game with that, observing, getting into that loop, really getting better at it each time. I think a really good story that demonstrates this, it's for highly commercial reasons, but I still think it's a very interesting story. So going back to the early 1900s, Henry Ford, the guy who created Ford, he's got the most successful business in the world at the time. And he's got a team which are pumping out cars faster than anyone can buy now. They're so effective and efficient. They're pumping out cars and they've got no one left to sell them to. So they've sold them to the whole upper class, the people who have time to go and drive. And he's a little bit stuck. And he says, all right, well, people aren't consuming these cheap cars because they don't have time to use them. And at the time, most people worked 6 days a week, more or less, and they'd work something in the vicinity of 9 hours a day. So they didn't really have time to spend on leisure, you know, like they had Sundays off. A lot of Sundays were related to church and family activity, and people weren't going for drives in the countryside. So he was sort of presented with this situation where he thinks the majority of Americans, I want to sell cars to them, but they haven't got time to use them, right? Now, he could have sat back and hoped that the world just magically changed, or he could create the change he wanted to see, as I'm saying there, right? So what he basically did there was he took his 6-day-a-week employees, paid them the same amount for 5 days of work, and effectively by doing so created the weekend. A lot of other factors that go into that, but he literally created a spare day that people were paid for to spend money on. And, you know, the rest is history. They were the biggest car company for years and years and years. And he did indeed expand into that market of that middle and working class of America who now had a weekend. And we obviously know how much of a cultural thing it is to get in your car and drive on a weekend now. So created the world he wanted to see. Key points around this, just coming back to be clear on where you're going, lead yourself first. So I think that's one of the biggest things that anyone can get behind is someone who really embodies their own values, their own ideals. It's much easier to follow that one. So we've got to lead ourselves first in the change we want to create. Next slide, please, Carl. Once you've got a vision of how you want the world to be versus how it is, And when I say world, I'm just talking about this could be a small group, it could be a team at work, it could be your friends, it could be a business, it could be your whole nation, it could be the whole world, right? Literally. Different sizes, and different things go with that. But there are a lot of commonalities, and that's what I'll talk about. So once you have an idea of this world you're looking to create and it's inside of your head and it's crystal clear and it's formed, that's great. But now you've got to get it out of your head and into the followers or anyone you want to inspire. You've got to get it into their heads in a meaningful way. I think one of the best ways to actually look at that is look at a really inspiring piece of leadership that a lot of people know, and I'll pick it apart a little bit. So most people would have heard or know of the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr., which I'll expand on a little bit, and like fully acknowledging there is a slight, it's more than a slight, there's a slight difference between I have a dream and grow sales by 5% next quarter. They're different things, but there are a lot of commonalities. So we'll pick it apart. So the I Have a Dream speech, if you haven't ever heard the whole thing, that the next little section after is the bit I'll pick. So he gets up and he says, I have a dream that one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers, which is hugely moving stuff. And this is something that people talk about regularly 70 years later, right? And it's just a beautiful piece of communication. So to pick that apart, the first thing he does is he calls out his destination. He says, who's along for the ride? I've got this dream in my head. I'd love you to be a part of it. It's super action-based, right? I love it because it tells you where you are now and where you're going, right? Little turn of phrase here. That's known as the civil rights movement for a reason. It's action-based. It's not the civil rights status quo. It's a civil rights movement. Here we go. I'm going here. Come with me. Let's make that a reality. And then 3 things within that. I'm going to talk about my 3 V's here of getting this stuff out of your head that really anchor it down for people. He's got a super clear message, but he makes it a line behind these 3 ideas, the V. So that the first V is he makes it valuable. Now, valuable just means desirable. It's something I want. It's a world I want to be a part of. And ideally, if you've got people following you already, they're aligned to that. So that should be a given, but it's really important that it's desirable to the people you are seeking to lead. The second V is visual. So it's super visual. You can very easily picture in your head what he's talking about. So there's that visual of little black boys and girls holding hands. That world you want to live in, you can picture that being a reality, and you'll be able to know when we're there or when we're on the right track. The last V is visceral, like you can feel it deep down. Just means you can feel it inside. So again, it's like it's got to stir something up in me. Again, if it is desirable and valuable, it'll do a lot of that, but I can feel what he's talking about. There's themes of love, there's themes of connectedness, brotherly love, these things, they come together. So when you do have this destination you're calling out and you want to take people along for the ride, think of those 3 V's. So it's valuable, they want it. It's visual, they can see it or picture it. And it's visceral, they can feel it. That's the big hook, right? That's the first thing you're sharing that's really going to latch them in. And it's a very big idea. And it sounds great, it sounds nice, but then people are going to have that energy and they're going to be like, all right, what next? We've got to make it digestible. And that's what a lot of these points here I've put up on the slide and in the handout are really about. It's about breaking the stages down so it's not too enormous. And it's about helping people fit together on this stuff, right? So first thing we do is basically work out what the next step is and then get out in front. And what we want to do in doing that is we want to get out and we want to help the team understand how to know if things are working. So this is where it's super important to call out your destination, call out what you're trying to create, whether it's a project, a world-changing event, whatever. Call it out, but then give people ways to score and self-track progress along the way. So one way of saying this is like you've got a roadmap. Here are our 5 major stops on the way, right? So it could be goals, it could be sprints, project completion, signs of progress, metrics, any of these things. It's super important that you help people connect to how they're going so that they can self-orient and go on the journey with you. Another thing that's super important is helping people understand their role in making progress. So basically handing over the results to the team in a meaningful way so that they can make progress themselves and they can understand how they are making progress as it relates to what we're trying to create. Another way of saying that is who's responsible for what. It's really important that the individual knows that and that the team knows that about the other individuals. The level I'm talking about here is helping the team understand the what and the why, and then trusting them to act. So what and why, you sort of notice in there, and you can see it in the Martin Luther King speech. He doesn't talk about how we'll do it. And I haven't to this point talked about how we'll do it. The key to creating ownership in this stuff is giving the team the what, and then they provide the how, and we're trusting them to do it. Now, the reason this is so important is basically because if you make it your job to tell people how to do things and what to do next, that's all you'd ever do. And think about something as large as trying to land a man on the moon. The vision of a leader, you couldn't possibly tell every single person what action to do next and expect to have a good outcome in any less than 100,000 years, right? So it's super important that the team own the how. Your job's at the what and the why level. Then basically you're just going to keep an eye on things, and if it gets a little bit off track, you guide it back on, right? Equally though, you want to cheer wins along the way, and you want people to be able to understand that it's working. So this is about those first steps. It's about creating and building momentum as you go. You want the team to see really meaningful progress. And I've got a lot more on that later, but that meaningful progress, big phrase there. So summary of this point, that you've got the vision in your head of what you're trying to create. We've got to get it out in a meaningful way and get people moving. We've got to do it in ways that can be digested. When you're doing the big hook, remember the 3 V's. So valuable, visual, visceral. Want it, see it, feel it. Yep. And then let them keep score along the way. Super important. Jump to the next slide there. Thanks, Carl. Creating and maintaining the environment. Basically, I'm talking about cultural stuff here. So now you've got self-clarity, you've got an idea of how the world wants to be, you're up and running. This is where the real work happens, and it's about creating and maintaining an environment or a culture that produces the kind of results you're looking to produce. Your job here is at that level of monitoring the key health of the culture and creating feedback into it that grows it and keeps it healthy, right? One of the ways I think about the best teams, they're like kids that play in a playground. So it's like, here's the playground, here's what we're trying to do. There are the boundaries, there are the fences, basic rules, don't push each other, don't hit each other, but go for it, play. If you watch any great team, it's not like highly thought out, it's not instructional. It's people know what their roles are, they know what they have to do, they know what they're trying to achieve. They work together to do it. It looks like kids at play. It moves naturally, right? Now, to do that, you need a great culture, obviously. Culture, when I talk about it, is saying basically how we do things around here. A great phrase I love to describe this by the author Seth Godin. He says, people like us do things like this. And that's talking about culture at an identity level. And that's such a powerful space to be. Now, just jumping to one of the other points there, recognizing the arena. I think this is super important to call out because where you're playing determines how much buy-in and what kind of culture, right? So equally as does the size of the world you're talking about. So if you're literally talking about changing the world, something at say a UN type level, you really need high performance, high commitment. People need to be holding one another to a high standard. If you're talking about a school committee or a sports club, completely different beast. A lot of the same commonalities, but culturally, there'll be different demands on the people there of one another, right? So one way of saying that is the culture you need is necessitated by the type of results you're trying to create. So just thinking about what's at stake, what buy-in people are likely to have. Again, that's about meeting the world as it is. You can't be completely uncalibrated with that, or you're never going to get people along with you. So once you've got everyone understanding and sort of opting into what you're trying to do, it's up and running. You just need to create and maintain an environment that produces results. I think a really great way to think about this is it's like a fish tank aquarium scenario. So you've got, are we doing freshwater or saltwater? What's the pH level need to be at? What's the healthy range? What's the temperature? It's no different for any team you are leading. If you've got friction amongst the team, if they're not playing nice, if you've got some saltwater fish and some freshwater fish, it's pretty hard to create an environment that's going to be conducive to growth and health, right? So it's super important that that's continually monitored, because, you know, if that drops too low, the pH, for even 10 minutes, that could be enough to wipe out half the fish. It's not as dramatic in that sense when we're talking about the leadership, but it certainly is something that you need to stay on top of day to day, week to week, right? The way we do that is just little continual pulse checks. So these conditions we're looking for, is it too hot? Is it too cold? How are we getting along? It's basically asking yourself, how's the culture? And that's what I was saying about before, that different people have different amounts of time to dedicate this. Having those little pulse checks in, though, is one of the most powerful things you can do quite quickly and all the time, which could just be a passing conversation with someone in a hallway. It could be a team meeting. There's lots of different ways to do it, but someone needs to be inspecting that, and really just making sure that it is a healthy environment. Another way of saying this is basically just your job is helping the team fit together the right way and play well. So help them come together in meaningful and useful ways. So thinking about the outcomes you're trying to create, maybe it requires a lot of deep work. So that means we don't do heaps of meetings. Maybe we've got a lot of things to figure out, so we do need a lot of meetings. It's recognizing what the group needs at that phase to progress meaningfully. Asking yourself questions over and over, like, how do we work best together? What do we need from one another at the moment? How can we bring that together? Basically, what you're doing is helping people figure out how they fit together, how information, how decisions flow, how they can best produce results, and how they can get the best from one another. What I'm talking about here as the leader and what you need to be doing, what you need to be giving them, it's checking in on how it's going, and then it's challenging people individually and in teams in meaningful ways. The way I would think about this is you want to be able to, like, if anyone's been to like a carnival or a fair, you have those funhouse mirrors, right? Really what you want to do is be holding up a funhouse mirror to the person or the team in their ideal state. So reflecting back what could be for them, that next step forward, reflecting that back and challenging them in meaningful ways where it stretches them just the right amount so that they are, you know, at the edge of their ability, and it's really in a meaningful way where they grow. That's the kind of culture that breeds success, right? You want that happening between one another as well. Like, anyone who's been part of a high performance team would certainly know that, like, as one person's standards go up, so do another's. Really amplifies quickly there. Environments like that, people want to have attached to them at an identity level. So like, you'll see this all the time on LinkedIn, online. People, anyone who's been anywhere near big tech will have ex-Google or Facebook, or they'll talk about these big companies. They want to attach them to themselves at an identity level. People who have, you know, volunteered for the Red Cross, people who've worked, have been in the Marines. These are things that are held up as like identity-based cultures they want to be a part of, and people are proud to be associated with those movements. That brings the best out of people, and that's a really great feedback loop. They perform high so that they feel good as a team. The team performs higher. People individually perform higher. They attach at an identity level. It's just an upward spiral, right? A way of saying that is people feel super connected to the cause, or to a high performance ideal. And people like us do things like this, yeah? Connect people to the work and make it meaningful there. All that stuff is culture, right? It's how we do things around here and why it matters. That's like sort of two key phrases. I want to keep connecting back to that. The reason that's super important is culture creates decisions and results. So if you've got bad culture, you're probably going to get bad decisions. You're probably going to get bad results. It's super important to spend time monitoring the health of the culture, so that you are creating culture that produces the kind of results you want, because that's a virtuous cycle for you as a leader. So basic summary of that one: keep everyone playing in the playground, monitor the pH. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Fine tune all the time, little small checks. Jump on to the next one. Thanks, Carl. Create connectedness. So we want to make people connected to their work, to causes, all these things. Basically, we're connecting people back to the why. Super quick story on this one that explains it really well. Late 60s, John F. Kennedy's touring NASA. He wants to put a guy, they want to put a man on the moon, a space mission. He goes to the bathroom, he's wandering down a back alley, and he runs into a janitor and he says, "Hey, I'm Jack. Who are you? What do you do?" And the guy's just mopping, he's a janitor. And he doesn't say, "I'm a janitor." He says, "Well, sir, I'm helping put a man on the moon." I think that's a great example of connecting this back to a bigger idea. You can imagine how much more passionately that guy wants to mop a floor if it's helping put a man on the moon. So he's connected back to the why. If you've done your work there as the leader and you've inspired, you've got a big why and a what. It's really easy for people to get behind. The other elements of this is like connect the team to the team, right? So this is your social stuff. This is getting people to work on things together. It's cross pollination. So different people from different departments bring unique expertise. I think if your job as a leader here is to remove yourself from it. You don't want to be a hub and spoke where information has to move through you. You want to be like a spider's web so that the team is connected and enmeshed in a network and everyone can talk to everyone. So I'm talking about things here like distributed decision making, ability to communicate with one another, even down to like control of their own budgets in a reasonable sense. You don't want to have to be making every decision. Your job is at the level of the what and the why and connecting people to that. You want them to feel connected to the team and you want them to feel connected to the results, right? If your team can't control the how, you'll have to, really simply. Equally on this, connected to the results, you want to make it super easy for your team to be able to actually self-score. So I think about this one like, imagine if there was a game of football running and the umpire said, "Oh, I'll tell you the scores after the game." How do you think that game would play out versus putting it up on the scoreboard so the players can see how it's going, right? It's super important to keep your people connected to results and feel like they're making meaningful progress. And in a way that isn't just relying on you telling them if progress is meaningful, let them score it themselves. I think if the team can see it themselves and without you, even better. And this is part of like that spider's web I'm talking about there. Next huge point on that is make people feel seen, heard, and felt. Basically, what we want to leave people with is a feeling that they came in and got behind the cause, whether it's work or volunteering or whatever, and they can say to themselves, you know, it mattered today that I came in and contributed, so they can see progress. I think a lot of work in the yesteryear was like I had a pile of timber, I went to work building a frame, and I can see the completion there. So much of work isn't physically satisfying in that way anymore, where you can actually see progress day to day. A lot of us spend time and effort on, spreadsheets, projects, long work, where you can do hours and hours of work that do contribute to the whole, but it's really hard to see and score. So I think that's where it's super important to make people feel part of the team, feel connected to results, feel connected to one another, and really let them know that their contribution matters. In summary, there largely, you just want to connect the team to one another. You want to connect them to the results, and you want to keep connecting them back up to the why we're doing it. So again, the why and the what. That's the level you want to be talking at and reminding people of that over and over. Next one there, please, Carl. Finally there, it's make it meaningful. Or another way of saying that is make sure that the people following you feel like it's meaningful. So meaning is very different for everyone. This is why it's so important to know what is important and aspirational for each member of your team, right? Everyone wants to be a part of something meaningful, something bigger than themselves. That's what you can help them do as the leader, right? You can help them continually opt in and go further in and buy into it and challenge and grow throughout. It's much easier to align energy than it is to create it flat out. The reason this is an important idea is that if you understand the individuals working with you, the people you are leading, if you understand their individual aspirations, where they're going, what they want for their life, the things they care about, it's so much easier then to align those motivations and aspirations in themselves to elements of their work, right? If you know the ambitions of your people, you can support them as part of the work. You can give them, you can help them on skill pathways that align to what they want to become. You can give them exposure to things. So if someone wants to become a manager, they could have exposure in leading a team in a non-consequential way. It's even just like little elements of coaching throughout. So if you know what someone aspires to, their vision, their values, you've got a much better chance of challenging them meaningfully and bringing the best out in them. So breathing life into them sparking, breathing life onto that spark and sparking the flame. Again, we want to remind everyone why it matters. So that's a lot of the job is, we've set out, you've got to keep it meaningful. So we get out in the path, we're doing these things, we told people to come with us, we've connected them to results, we're out and doing it. You're going to come up against obstacles, you're going to come up against dead ends. We need people to keep it really why-based and understand where we're going, because that's what drives people and creates momentum. But equally, it's super important for people to know how we're tracking and be able to see the progress we're making. By doing this, by making sure we are on track, by making sure we are progressing, it actually ensures meaningful progress, which again creates a loop because people feel like they are making meaningful progress and we're not doing things just cause, and they're not all leading to dead ends, right? That's how you create momentum. To sum that all up, when people are connected to the team, to the mission, to their work, to one another, they're engaged. Big word, they're engaged, which means basically they're going to work hard and they self-motivate because they're highly engaged in that idea, in what we're doing. When you combine that with working on the right stuff in terms of that mission you're trying to create, that's alignment. So getting people pulling in the same direction towards the same outcome, that's the alignment element. When you've got those two things where you've got huge momentum pulling in the right direction, you've got an unstoppable force, and that's a team that really self-perpetuates. And that's a lot of what I'll be talking about in the next session. Suffice to say, it's so important to keep connecting people back to the meaningful elements of what they're doing, and really helping them self-score and see that the things they are doing are making progress and keeping it meaningful. Summing up on the whole journey, right? Be super clear about what you want yourself. That's the first step, and why you want it. That gives you your vision and mission and destination, right? Get it out of your head and share it in a way that people can opt in on the journey with you. Lead that change yourself so that there's a benchmark and you are that benchmark you're always aspiring to. That's super powerful to get behind. Then basically it's just your job to create and maintain an environment, a culture that gives you growth that you want, that produces the kind of results you're talking about. We want to foster connectedness of all types, so both between the team, to the big ideas, to progress. And then we want to keep it meaningful for people so that it actually means something. It feels like it's making a difference. It's meaning that they feel inside of them. That's how you inspire and effectively breathe life into people over and over. Heaps covered there. Thank you for the time, but get out, be clear, and do the good stuff and lead people.
Thanks, Jake. Wow, that was a lot of content covered. So for those that have joined today or will watch in the future, will definitely take something away from that, because that was really great. Jake's details are on screen, so if you do have any specific queries for him, don't hesitate to reach out to him directly. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, so if you have joined late, you can watch the entire session on our YouTube channel later today and moving forward. And there's a one-page handout which I will be sharing with those that are registered by email, so you've got a handy reference with all the points that Jake has raised today, available for you to refer to in the future or share with family and friends as you wish. So we'll now jump into the Q&A part, Jake, and I've just been looking actually at the questions that we've received ahead of time. You've actually covered most of them, which is really good. Some of them, let's go through a few others. Right, there was one around tone at the top, right? So it's of course sort of a key principle in any organizational structure. How does it sort of feed into the points that you've raised today around leadership style?
Sorry, just the first part of the question there.
So about tone at the top. So when you it's all about the direction you get from the top and how that sort of sets the culture throughout the organization. How does it sort of feed into your principles that you've raised today around how to be an inspiring leader?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, clarity at that top level is such an important thing, and creating consistency of message. I think if you just take it to an individual level, which I've largely talked about today, and the kind of person you need to be, certainty is a really important element of it. So talking about the things that you can be clear on and creating certainty, naturally people want to move towards certainty and away from uncertainty. That's one element. But then really importantly, the benchmark I want to set for myself and see for myself is that when I am uncertain, you call it out, but you create certainty around the ways you are navigating uncertainty. So you let people know that you are dealing with that issue. Um, like one of the best things you can do from the top. And I think that the other element of that, again, clarity of messaging, the more layers you get, the more important that it is that you focus on the why level and that emotive stuff and really simple messages, because it will get diffused. And if it's not clear and easy to understand, it definitely won't land. The further down you get and the more ripples out it has.
Yeah. And from a practical perspective, Jake, with your clients and those that you've supported along the way, how do you get them to ensure that they're practicing these principles, I guess, on a daily basis, right? Like, you can get overwhelmed with your own work, and the tasks that you need to complete and deliverables you need to meet, etc. Sometimes you might forget about, the principle that you've shared throughout this session. What sort of advice would you give to leaders in an organization to have these principles at the forefront of their mind throughout their day-to-day work?
Huge, because the easiest thing is to just get stuck into the day-to-day of it because we've all got a job to do. I love tiny little prompts. So I think so much of your behavior is determined by the questions you ask yourself. So if you have good, powerful, useful questions, your brain will naturally go about their business of finding good answers for it. So, a great example is one I had within the presentation there around how can I help get the best out of the team, or how can I help the team fit together? How can I create an environment that is conducive to growth? Something like that. Knowing the questions is one thing. The bigger issue I see, though, is just awareness in general. So you can't change something you're not aware of. All good and well to have the questions, but if you haven't thought about that for 3 weeks, completely useless. So tiny little reminders. Some people I work with do this by journaling on a certain question every night before bed, for example. Others, it could just be a calendar reminder. Really simply, one of the benefits I get in being a coach and working with people across points is I can ask these questions and pull them into that mental space. But if you don't have that, I think self-reflection points are so important, and just even little reminders. You could have a themed question for yourself for the week, which pulls you to a certain viewpoint and makes you look at your situation in a certain way. And then I believe if you're a motivated person, which everyone is, you ask yourself the right questions, you focus on the right stuff, naturally you'll get the right results. It's just a matter of having the right lens for it and looking at it from the right perspective. So if you can have a good question like that to ask yourself that you're looking to solve, coming back to that viewpoint over and over, I think naturally you'll find a way to solve it.
Yeah, I think just reminding yourself of those principles, I think with those little prompts, as you said, is a great tip. Obviously, you can sort of get overwhelmed with your day-to-day work, forget to realize that you're also a leader in some shape or form. And leaders don't just have to be at the top, right? They can be throughout the organization. And as you said, even that janitor, right, at that Space Academy was, clearly understood that they wanted to keep their place in a nice and clean condition for the team that were going up to the space station. So yeah, I think that's a great analogy.
Couldn't agree more. And I think one of the beautiful things about inspiring leadership is that it creates other leaders, because it pulls people in behind that idea. And everyone who's had a great leader in their life knows the impression it's left on them and how it makes them feel. And I would suggest that there's no great leader that couldn't easily name 2 or 3 huge leaders in their life that have sort of pulled them forward as well.
Actually, we might jump to that question that we've got, actually, Jake. Which leaders have inspired you? Like, do you have a top 2 that you sort of always recall?
Top 2's hard. I mean, some of the most important ones have been like young coaches in sports club scenarios, and just watching how they move through the world, the kind of things they stand up to, the kind of things they challenge. Professionally, I think it's a really interesting idea. Is I love watching how even clients, how they navigate certain spaces, or peers or other people I work with. So in that sense of like one massive, it's like I could rattle off a list for about 45 minutes. I think there's been some even like great teachers, I think are massive, that like going through school, it wasn't the most academic school, but there were a couple of teachers that I think about regularly, and the kind of things that the conversations they started and brought to the forefront for me that I don't think would have been popular in the places that they were teaching, and certainly at the time. So, like for example, relationships with drinking and alcohol. I remember a particular teacher talking about his journey of sobriety for the last 15 years as a fairly young guy who came out of metal bands. Which like that took me a long time, and that's something I've done recently. But that opened a door to a conversation that I wasn't ready to have yet. But he went to that place and was willing to hold the space, and like I was saying, he was like being that change you wanted to see. It's just beautiful. Like that's rippled on. It took 15 years, but I think about that regularly.
Yeah. And with leadership style, I guess the leader themselves can't just apply the one or a uniform leadership style. I guess they have to adapt based on who they're leading. Is that sort of aligned with your understanding as well, Jake, of a leader needing to adapt the way they lead depending on the individuals that they are supporting?
I'll say yes and no and hold them both in parallel is correct. So, um, personal authenticity is one of the most important things you can do there. So, I don't think it serves anyone to pretend to be someone you're not, to be acting as you should be as opposed to as you are. That said, I think there are a lot of frameworks, and I certainly believe, as you can tell by the fact that I do things like this, people can learn and grow. So, um, within that, I would say like the place you want to anchor yourself to is like be clear about the things you are clear about and clear about the things you're not. I love the idea that people should come with warning labels. So if you're a first time leader, it's like I'm going to have a great crack at this, but I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes and I might offend you. Please interact with me as that. I'll bring all of myself. Please bring all of yourself.
Mm. And coming towards the final question, Jake, how do you work with individuals who are convinced that their leadership style works? What sort of reflection points do you leverage so that they can reconsider and tailor their leadership style for the better?
Oof, great question. I would look to the things that they're saying, the kind of results they're saying they want to produce, but they're not. That's probably the most interesting place to talk there. The like to oversimplify, but the level we're at determines the kind of results we're able to produce. If there's something you want to produce that you're not able to yet, that suggests either a mindset or skill gap. Um, so that's the interesting space to be, would be if someone's saying that. It's another way of saying is maybe that what got you here won't necessarily get you there, and then it's an opt-in if you are if you want to create those kind of results. What person would you need to be to do those kind of things continually to create those kind of results? It's about seeing that there is another possibility and whether or not they want to go on that journey.
Great. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Thank you, Jake. Its details are again on screen. So if you do have any questions about today's seminar or anything else related to leadership, you can always give Jake a call or an email. That brings us to the end of the formal part of the session. So thank you for joining today. A recording of this session will be made available on our YouTube channel later today. And there's also a one-page handout which Jake has prepared, which summarizes the topics he's talked about today. That'll be shared by email to those that registered. Please do follow us on our social channels. We rely on word of mouth. And if you have enjoyed today's session, please do share it with your family and friends so hopefully they can learn about something new. And Jake will also be joining us in a few weeks' time on Wednesday, the 26th of February, and he'll be speaking about how to engage and align a team. So a complementary topic to today's session, and hopefully you can join us then. Thank you, Jake, and have a good night.
It's brilliant. Thanks, Carl. Love the fact that you're doing a platform. Great stuff.
Thanks, mate. All the best, guys. See ya.